I grew up believing our house was the safest place on earth. It wasn't fancy. Just a two-story suburban home tucked into a quiet neighborhood where people still waved at each other while shoveling snow. The kind of place where nothing ever happened, and if it did, everyone heard about it within the hour. My parents bought the house before I was born. Every dent in the drywall, every squeaky stair, every uneven cabinet door had a memory tied to it. I knew them all. That's why what happened that Christmas still feels unreal. Because fear doesn't belong in places you love. My parents had kids late in life, really late. They had my oldest brother, Travis, when they were barely out of their 20s. 6 years later, they had me. By the time I was in high school, they were already talking about retirement plans and downsizing. Then came Noelle. She was 2 when this happened. People always asked if she was adopted. Some thought she was my niece. Others assumed she was my kid, which always made things awkward at grocery stores. She's my sister, I'd say. And people would blink like their brain needed a second to reboot. Noelle was born right before Christmas. A snowstorm hit the night my mom went into labor, and the roads were so bad my dad barely made it to the hospital. My mom liked to say Noelle arrived wrapped in winter itself. She was tiny, loud, curious about everything, and she trusted me completely. That's the part that still hurts the most. That December, I was home from college for winter break. My first semester had been rough, new city, new people, the kind of loneliness you don't expect until it hits you at 3 in the morning. Coming home felt grounding, safe. My parents, on the other hand, were exhausted. They hadn't had time alone in years. Noelle was a full-time job, and between work schedules and parenting again in their late 40s, they were running on fumes. So they booked a couple's trip. A small cabin in Vermont, 6 nights, snow, wine, fireplaces, just them. We deserve this, my mom said, half guilty, half hopeful. I told them I'd handle Noelle. I meant it. The day they left, my mom hovered. She triple-checked the locks, the baby monitor, the stove. You sure you're okay with this? She asked, gripping the car door. Mom, I laughed. Relax. I've got it. She smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes. My dad hugged me harder than usual. Call if anything feels off, he said quietly. I brushed it off. I shouldn't have. The first few days were uneventful. Noelle followed me everywhere, dragging stuffed animals behind her like they were pets. I let her play in the living room while I watched TV, keeping the lights off except for the Christmas tree. I always loved how the tree made the room feel warmer. The glow bounced off the walls, the ornaments catching little sparks of light. It made everything feel calm, controlled. At night, I carried Noelle upstairs, changed her into pajamas, and put her in the crib. Her room was next to my parents' bedroom, connected by a shared bathroom. A Jack and Jill setup. 2 doors, 1 bathroom in between. It mattered later. At the time, it was just how the house was built. The night everything changed was quiet. Too quiet. Snow had started falling again, thick and heavy, muffling the outside world. The streetlights cast an orange glow over the driveway, but beyond that, everything was dark. Noelle fell asleep early. I tucked her in, turned on the baby monitor, and went downstairs. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, like nothing bad could reach us. That's when the monitor crackled. At first, I thought it was interference. Then the sound shifted. Low, warped, almost like breathing. I paused the movie. The sound changed again. Not crying. Not movement. Something closer to a voice. My stomach tightened. Don't be stupid, I muttered to myself. I stood up anyway. And that's when everything started to unravel. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the baby monitor like it had personally offended me. The sound stopped. Dead silence. My heart was still racing, but I told myself what everyone tells themselves in moments like that. Old house. Bad signal. You're tired. I hit play on the movie again and sat back down, but my attention was gone. Every little crackle from the monitor made my shoulders tense. Then it happened again. A low, uneven sound pushed through the speaker. Not loud, almost cautious. Like whoever or whatever was making it didn't want to be heard. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the couch. "Hello," I said quietly, feeling ridiculous for even speaking. The sound shifted. It wasn't random anymore. It followed a rhythm. In, out, breathing. My chest tightened so fast it felt like I'd missed a step walking downstairs. "Nope," I whispered, already standing. I took the stairs 2 at a time. I pushed Noelle's door open too hard. She jolted awake instantly and started crying. The sharp kind that slices straight through your nerves. "Oh, hey, I'm sorry," I said quickly, scooping her up. "I didn't mean to scare you." Her little arms wrapped around my neck. I could feel her heart pounding against my chest. I scanned the room. The nightlight glowed softly. Shadows lay exactly where they always did. Nothing moved. Nothing was wrong. I rocked her gently, swaying back and forth until her cries softened into sniffles. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." She rested her head on my shoulder. I stayed like that longer than necessary, just listening to her breathing, to the house. When I finally laid her back down, she rolled onto her side, thumb finding its way into her mouth. I exhaled slowly. "See? Nothing." I stepped back into the hallway. That's when I noticed the bathroom door. It was cracked open. Just a few inches. I frowned. I didn't remember leaving it like that. Still, I nudged it shut with my foot and headed back downstairs. I didn't make it 10 minutes before the monitor lit up again. This time, it was crying. Real crying. The kind that hits you right in the gut. I ran. Noelle was standing in her crib when I burst in. Her face flushed, tears streaking down her cheeks. She wasn't looking at me. She was pointing. Straight past my shoulder. At the bathroom door. Which was open again. My stomach dropped. "What is it?" I asked softly, crouching down. "What do you see?" She didn't answer. Just kept pointing. Her finger was shaking. I turned slowly. The bathroom was dark. Too dark. I reached for the light switch and flipped it on. Nothing. Empty. The shower curtain hung still. The sink mirror reflected my own pale face back at me. I forced a smile and turned back to her. "There's nothing there, sweetheart," I said. "See? Just the bathroom." She didn't look convinced. I picked her up and stepped into the bathroom anyway, checking behind the door, inside the shower, even the linen closet. Nothing. Still, my skin crawled like I'd missed something obvious. I stayed in her room longer that time. Sat beside the crib, rubbed her back, whispered nonsense until her breathing slowed and her eyes closed. Before leaving, I shut both bathroom doors. I stood there for a second longer, hand resting on the knob. Locked. Back downstairs. The movie had ended. The living room felt different now. Too quiet. I turned the volume up on the TV just to fill the space. That's when the monitor crackled again. But this time, it wasn't crying. It wasn't breathing. It was whispering. Low, close, intimate. A man's voice. Not loud enough to make out words, but unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I stood up so fast the coffee table rattled. "No," I said out loud. "No, no, no." I took off toward the stairs. Halfway up, Noelle screamed. I burst into her room. She was crying harder than I'd ever heard her cry before, standing in the crib, shaking. The bathroom door was wide open. Both of them. I didn't move. I couldn't. The air felt heavy, like walking into a room where an argument had just ended. Then I saw movement. A shape stepped forward from my parents' bedroom. A man. Barefoot. Dirty sweatshirt. He smiled when he saw me. And that's when my body finally reacted. For half a second, my brain refused to process what my eyes were seeing. A man didn't belong there. He didn't belong in my parents' bedroom, stepping through the bathroom like he owned the place. He didn't belong in our quiet house, on a snowy night, smiling at me while my little sister screamed behind me. But he was there. Real. Breathing. Close enough that I could smell him. He looked ordinary. That was the worst part. Mid-30s, maybe older. Unshaven. Dark hoodie hanging loose on his frame. Sleeves frayed at the cuffs. His hair was greasy and flattened like he'd been wearing a hat too long. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking. He was calm. That smile never reached his eyes. Hey, he said softly, like we were about to have a casual conversation. Didn't mean to wake her. Something inside me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't say anything. I grabbed Noelle. She shrieked as I lifted her out of the crib, her arms locking around my neck so tight it hurt. I turned and ran. The man took a step forward. Easy, he said. You're gonna slip. That was it. That was the moment fear turned into pure, blinding survival. I bolted. I didn't bother with shoes. Didn't bother with a coat. I flew down the stairs, gripping Noelle so tight I was scared I'd hurt her. The hardwood was slick under my bare feet, and I nearly went down twice, catching myself on the railing. Behind me, I heard movement. Not running. Walking. Slow. Steady. Like he knew he didn't need to rush. I reached the front door, fumbled with the lock, and yanked it open. Cold air slammed into me. Snow bit into my feet as I sprinted across the lawn, Noelle sobbing into my shoulder. I didn't look back. I ran straight to the neighbor's house. Darlene lived next door, mid-50s, divorced, always outside walking her dog or sweeping her porch. Her porch light was on. I banged on the door like my life depended on it. Because it did. Please, I yelled. Please open the door. The door flew open. Darlene stood there in a robe, eyes wide. Oh my God, what happened? There's a man in my house, I said, words tumbling over each other. He was in my sister's room. Please call the police. She didn't ask questions. She grabbed my arm and pulled us inside, locking the door behind her. You're okay, she said firmly. You're okay now. She took Noelle from me, cradling her like she'd done it 1,000 times. I've got her, she said. Go sit down. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor. Darlene dialed 911. There's an intruder, she said, voice steady. In my neighbor's house. They ran here. The police arrived fast. Red and blue lights painted the snow outside like a nightmare Christmas display. 2 officers knocked on Darlene's door. They took my statement while another pair went to search the house. I told them everything. The monitor, the whispering, the man. They exchanged looks. That didn't help. They searched every room, every closet, every crawl space. Nothing. No forced entry. No broken windows. No signs of a struggle. One officer came back outside and shook his head. House is clear, he said. I stared at him. That's not possible, I said. He was there. I saw him. We believe you, he said gently. But he's gone. How did he get in? He hesitated. Sometimes people leave doors unlocked. I knew I hadn't. But I didn't argue. Darlene insisted we stay the night. I didn't fight her. I didn't sleep. My parents came home early. My mom cried when I told her. My dad checked every lock twice. They called it a break-in. An attempted burglary. Something that made sense. Something normal. But nothing about it felt normal. 2 weeks later, my mom asked me to put the decorations away. That's when I went into the attic. And found the truth. I didn't want to go into the attic. I know that sounds stupid, but after everything that had happened, the thought of being alone in the house again made my stomach twist. Still, my mom was in the kitchen, my dad was outside on the phone, and Christmas was days away. Can you put the boxes up there? My mom asked, nodding toward the stack of decorations. I don't want to climb the ladder. Yeah, I said. Sure. The attic access was in the hallway ceiling, just outside my parents' bedroom. The same bedroom. I pulled the string and the ladder creaked down, each step sounding louder than it should have. The air that drifted down was stale, dusty, untouched. I climbed up with the first box and pushed it aside. At first, everything looked normal. Cardboard boxes, old suitcases, broken lamps we swore we'd fix someday. Years of clutter stacked in uneven rows. I set the box down and turned to leave. That's when I noticed the corner. The boxes there were stacked differently, too deliberately. They weren't just piled. They were arranged like a wall. My chest tightened. I took a step closer. Behind the boxes, something was dark where dust should have been thick. I pushed one box aside, then another, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. There was a bed. Not a real one, but close enough. blankets layered together, a pillow pressed flat like someone had been sleeping on it night after night, empty food wrappers shoved into a grocery bag, a half-empty water bottle. Someone had been living there. My vision blurred. I backed away so fast I nearly fell through the attic opening. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." My hands shook as I climbed down the ladder, nearly missing a rung. I hit the hallway floor and just sat there, staring at the ceiling like it might swallow me. My mom came running. "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed. The police came again. This time, they didn't dismiss it. The attic setup wasn't random. The blankets were warm. The food wrappers were recent. One officer stood there quietly for a long time. "He's been here a while," he said. "How long?" my dad asked. The officer didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, I couldn't stop replaying everything. The whispering, the breathing, the way the man smiled like he knew me. He hadn't just broken in. He'd been watching, learning routines, listening, waiting for the house to be empty enough, for me to be alone, for Noelle. The thought made me sick. We changed everything after that. Locks, alarms, cameras. But some things don't go back to normal. Noelle started waking up crying at night. I stopped sleeping with the door open. Even now, years later, I can't hear static without my heart racing. And every Christmas, when the house goes quiet and the tree lights are the only thing glowing, I swear I hear footsteps above the ceiling. Slow, careful, waiting. I was 19 the winter I learned how thin the line really is between a normal night and something that follows you forever. I didn't grow up thinking much about danger. My town, Red Hollow, was one of those places people passed through without remembering the name. One main road, a diner that closed too early, a hardware store that doubled as Gossip Central, and a single-screen movie theater that had somehow survived every streaming service and recession thrown at it. Everybody waved. Everybody knew your truck. If something bad happened, it was usually a deer jumping in front of someone's headlights or a drunk uncle ruining Thanksgiving. That sense of safety was stitched into me. It's probably why I took the job at the theater in the first place. I needed money for community college and gas, and the Cedar Ridge Cinema was hiring part-time, minimum wage, free popcorn, flexible hours. Easy. I started there the summer after high school and worked my way into being trusted with closing shifts. By December, I'd locked that building up alone more times than I could count. Christmas Eve was always weird, though. People assumed theaters would be packed. But in Red Hollow, Christmas Eve belonged to family dinners, church services, and long drives to relatives' houses. The cinema stayed open out of stubborn tradition more than demand. Management figured even a handful of tickets was better than closing entirely. So when I saw I was scheduled for an 8-hour shift on Christmas Eve, I didn't complain. I knew exactly how it would go: dead quiet, soft hum of the heaters, maybe a couple drifting in after dinner to kill time. Boring, but easy. I remember the drive-in that evening clearly. The sky had that washed-out gray look it gets right before snow, even though nothing ever came down. Christmas lights blinked lazily on porches. I passed the gas station where old men stood around drinking burnt coffee and talking about football. Everything felt normal, comfortable. I even said out loud, "Easy money," as I pulled into the theater lot. Inside, the place smelled like butter and stale soda syrup. The lobby lights were too bright for how empty it was. I clocked in, tied my apron, and took my place behind the counter. For the first few hours, it went exactly how I expected. A couple came in holding hands, arguing quietly about whether they should see the action movie or the rom-com. A dad brought his kid to an animated film and apologized like he was inconveniencing me just by existing. I smiled, tore tickets, refilled popcorn bins, checked my phone when no one was looking. Around 8, my coworker left. She waved and said, "Merry Christmas," like she always did, and told me not to forget to lock the side door. I laughed and said, "I've got it." Because I always did. By 9:30, the last movie had started. The lobby was empty. I sat on a stool behind the counter, scrolling through messages from friends posting pictures of ugly sweaters and family dinners. I remember feeling a small sting of loneliness, but nothing heavy. Just one of those quiet moments where you realize you're somewhere else while everyone you know is together. That's when I noticed the car. From the counter, I had a clear view through the big glass windows that faced the parking lot. Most of the lot was empty. Just my beat-up sedan near the front and one other car farther back, near the edge where the lights didn't quite reach. At first, I didn't think anything of it. People did that, sometimes sat in their cars until the previews were almost over. Some folks hated the ads that much. The headlights were on, aimed straight at the building, which made the glass reflect like a mirror. I glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. Cutting it close, I muttered. I went back to my phone. 5 minutes passed. 10. The car didn't move. I looked again. Still there. Engine running. Headlights steady. That little voice in the back of my head whispered that something was off, but I ignored it. Red Hollow didn't teach you to listen to that voice. It taught you to explain things away. Maybe they were arguing. Maybe they were waiting for someone inside. Maybe they were lost. By 10:30, I knew it wasn't a moviegoer. The last show would let out around midnight, and there was no reason to sit that far back for over an hour. I stood up, walked closer to the window, and tried to see inside the car. The glare from the headlights made it impossible. I felt stupid for feeling uneasy. I actually laughed at myself and said, "Get a grip," under my breath. The rest of the shift crawled. I did my closing duties early, cleaned the machines, wiped counters that didn't need wiping, paced the lobby just to burn nervous energy I couldn't explain. Every so often, I checked the lot. The car never moved. Midnight came and went. The final credits rolled. One by one, the last customers filed out, wishing me a Merry Christmas, none of them noticing the knot forming in my chest. When the doors finally closed behind the last person, the building felt cavernous, empty in a way that pressed in on your ears. I locked the side door, turned off hallway lights, and started the shutdown sequence I'd done 100 times. But my eyes kept drifting to the window. The car was still there. Same spot, same angle, same headlights. My palms were sweaty now. I kept telling myself not to overreact, but my body didn't care what my brain thought. Something was wrong. I could feel it in that instinctual way that doesn't use words. I finished everything except one thing: the front doors. To lock them, I had to step outside. I stood there for a full minute, keys in my hand, staring at my reflection in the glass. I remember thinking about my dad, how he always told me to trust my gut, even when it didn't make sense. I almost called him right then, just to hear his voice. Instead, I told myself I was being dramatic. "Lock the doors and go home," I whispered. "You're fine." I pushed the door open and stepped into the cold night air. The moment I turned back toward the building, keys raised. I heard it. Car doors. Not one. 3. The sound snapped through me like electricity. I spun around just in time to see the car at the back of the lot. 3 doors hanging open, 3 dark shapes stepping out. They didn't shout. They didn't wave. They didn't call out. They started walking toward me. Fast. Something primal took over. There was no thinking, no weighing options, just pure fear, flooding every nerve. I dropped the keys. I ran. I heard footsteps behind me, heavier than mine, gaining ground. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound alone told me everything I needed to know. I fumbled for my car door, hands shaking so badly I missed the handle the first time. When I finally yanked it open and threw myself inside, I locked the doors just as one of them reached my hood. The sound of his palm hitting the metal still echoes in my head. I started the engine and peeled out, tires screaming against the asphalt. In the rearview mirror, I saw them sprinting back toward their car. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. As I reached the exit of the lot, their car shot up behind me, headlights flooding my mirrors. They followed me. Every turn I made, they made. Every stop sign, they rolled through. My breathing came in sharp, broken gasps. I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I went home, they'd know exactly where I lived. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone when I called my dad. "Dad," I choked out the second he answered. "I need you." Right now. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Where are you?" "I'm being followed," I said. "Please. Go to the police station," he said immediately. "Don't stop. I'm on my way." I drove like I'd never driven before. Red lights didn't matter. Speed limits didn't exist. The other car stayed glued to my bumper the entire time. The police station came into view like a miracle. The moment I pulled into the lot, the car behind me accelerated, swerved around, and tore past, disappearing into the night. I sat there, hands locked around the steering wheel, shaking uncontrollably. By the time my dad arrived, I was crying so hard I couldn't speak. Christmas morning, I called my boss. My voice shook as I told him everything. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said, "You're never closing alone again." I quit a few months later. I still think about those men sometimes. About how close they got. About how different things could have been if I'd dropped my keys a second later, or if my car hadn't started right away. Red Hollow still looks the same. Quiet. Safe. But I know better now. Some nights are just nights, and some nights change you forever. I was 26 that Christmas, and if I'm being honest, I already knew weeks ahead of time that I'd be spending it alone. That wasn't new to me. I lived in a small rented house tucked into the hills outside a dying coal town in southern Appalachia. Not the kind of place you find on a map unless you're looking for trouble or trying to disappear. One gas station. One diner that closed by 6. Spotty cell service if the weather rolled in wrong. Most people I worked with lived closer to the interstate, but I preferred the quiet. Or at least, I thought I did. My family was scattered Arizona, Oregon. One cousin somewhere in Florida, who only called when he needed money. Flights were expensive, time off was rare, and my job didn't slow down just because it was December. I worked maintenance for a regional power contractor, the kind of work that kept the lights on for everyone else while you missed dinner, holidays, and sometimes sleep. Christmas Eve was just another shift on the schedule. I remember clocking out a little after 7 that night. The sky had already gone pitch black, the cold biting in a way that felt personal. The radio crackled on my drive home, some local DJ wishing folks a Merry Christmas like it meant something. I turned it off halfway through his sentence. The house was dark when I pulled in, the porch light flickering like it always did. I made a mental note to replace the bulb again. The wind pushed dry leaves across the gravel, the sound echoing louder than it should have. Inside, it smelled like cold wood and dust. No tree, no decorations, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant whine of wind slipping through the trees. I heated up leftover chili, ate standing at the counter, and didn't even bother turning the TV on. My body felt heavy in that deep, bone-tired way that sleep pulls you toward whether you want it or not. By 8:30, I was already heading downstairs. The bedroom was in the basement, cheaper rent, less noise from the road. I locked the door out of habit, tossed my phone on the nightstand, and collapsed onto the mattress without even changing my clothes. I fell asleep fast. Too fast. The sound that woke me didn't register right away. It slipped into my dream first, soft, rhythmic, wrong. Footsteps. I opened my eyes, staring at the low ceiling, my heart already beating faster than it should have been. At first, I told myself it was nothing. The house settled sometimes. Pipes knocked. Old beams complained in the cold. Then it happened again, clear as day. Footsteps. Above me. I sat up slowly, holding my breath. The main floor sat directly over the basement bedroom. Any movement up there carried straight down through the vents and exposed joists. These weren't creaks. These were deliberate, heel to floor, weight shifting. Someone was walking through my house. My first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion. A friend of mine, Caleb, used to crash at my place sometimes after a night out in the city. My house shaved 20 minutes off an Uber ride, and I'd given him a spare key months back. His girlfriend would usually scoop him up in the morning. It wasn't unusual, but he always texted first. I reached for my phone. No notifications. No missed calls. I stood up, moving quietly toward the base of the stairs. My heart started thudding harder with each step. "Caleb," I called out, keeping my voice low but firm. "Man, "That you?" Silence. Then, running, heavy, panicked footsteps tore across the main floor, fast and erratic. Not the drunk stumble of a friend, not casual. Whoever it was sprinted from one end of the house to the other. Every instinct in my body screamed at once. I didn't think. I reacted. I ducked beneath the staircase and pulled open the narrow crawlspace door, squeezing inside just as footsteps slammed down the stairs. The sound was close. Too close. I curled into myself, pressing my hand over my mouth as boots or shoes. I couldn't tell, hit the basement floor. Drawers were yanked open. Furniture scraped across concrete. The couch tipped, hit the floor hard. Whoever it was wasn't stealing. They were searching. I could hear breathing now. Fast. Angry. A man's voice muttering under his breath. Words blending together, sharp with frustration. "Where the hell did you go?" My stomach dropped. He knew I was there. Something crashed into a wall. A closet door splintered. Metal clanged as tools spilled from my workbench. I couldn't stop shaking. Every breath felt too loud. My chest burned from holding it in. I thought about my phone sitting uselessly upstairs. Thought about how stupid it was that I hadn't installed cameras. Thought about how this was how people disappeared. Quiet houses, no witnesses, bad luck. Then he screamed. It wasn't pain. It was rage. The sound echoed through the basement, raw and animal, before footsteps pounded back up the stairs. I stayed frozen long after the house went quiet. Minutes dragged into hours. Every noise sent my pulse racing the wind. The tick of the furnace kicking on. Something falling upstairs that might have been knocked loose earlier. I didn't move until the silence stretched long enough to feel unreal. When I finally crawled out, my legs nearly gave out under me. The basement looked like a storm had hit it. Nothing stolen. Nothing carefully searched. Just chaos. Desperation. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it, and locked myself back into the crawl space before dialing 911. The operator's voice grounded me. "Stay where you are," she said calmly. "Officers are on the way." Those 20 minutes felt longer than the rest of the night combined. When the police finally arrived, I came out slowly, hands raised, my voice barely steady enough to explain what happened. They swept the house top to bottom. No one was there. The backsliding door stood half open, glass warped where it had been pried. Nothing was taken. One officer shook his head quietly. "You're lucky," he said. "Whoever this was, they weren't here for your stuff." I didn't sleep in that house again that night, or ever quite the same way after. I stayed there another year. Nothing else happened. No break-ins, no signs, no answers. But every Christmas Eve after that, when the house went quiet, I still listened, because I knew what footsteps sounded like, and I knew how close I came to being found. I've never been big on traditions, but there was one thing I never broke, not once. Not since I was a kid. Every Christmas Eve, I went to Evan's house. Didn't matter how old we got. Didn't matter where life took us the rest of the year. Christmas Eve was ours. Board games, stupid arguments, too much junk food, his mom insisting we eat more even when we couldn't, and that quiet, heavy feeling that always comes around midnight when the world feels paused. We grew up in a rural part of northern Pennsylvania. The kind of place where towns blur into forests and roads don't have names, just bends you remember. Evan lived about 15 minutes from me, deeper into the woods. No streetlights, no cell service in spots. Just trees, cabins, and the occasional mailbox half buried in snow. By the time this happened, we were both in our mid-20s, old enough to have jobs, stress, and stories we didn't tell our parents anymore, but still young enough that Christmas Eve felt like a reset button. That year had been rough, real rough. I'd just gotten out of a long relationship that ended ugly. Evan had been working double shifts at the mill, saving up to move out. We didn't talk about that stuff much that night. Christmas Eve was our escape. You leave your problems at the door. Snow had been falling since early afternoon. Not a blizzard, just that steady, quiet kind that makes everything feel muffled. By 10 o'clock, the yard was white, and the trees looked like they were holding their breath. "Man, I'm telling you," Evan said, cracking open another beer. "This is the last year we're doing this sober." I laughed. "You say that every year." "Yeah, but this time I mean it." We were sitting on the floor, backs against the couch, a half-finished game spread out between us. His dad had already gone to bed. His mom had fallen asleep in the recliner with a Hallmark movie still playing softly in the background. By 11:30, I knew I shouldn't drive. Not wasted. Just enough that I didn't trust myself on icy back roads. "I'll call a ride," I said, pulling out my phone. Evan shook his head immediately. "Nah, no way. It's Christmas Eve, man. I got you." "You sure?" He grabbed his keys. "I drive these roads half asleep. You'll be fine." I hesitated just for a second. I wish I'd listened to that feeling. The truck heater took forever to warm up. Snow crunched under the tires as we pulled out of the driveway. The radio barely came through static and half a country song cutting in and out. The road was narrow. 2 lanes. No shoulder. Trees pressed in on both sides like walls. The snow reflected just enough light from the headlights to make the darkness beyond them feel thicker. Neither of us talked much. Not awkward, just calm. "You remember when we used to sled down Miller's Hill?" Evan said suddenly. "Yeah, and your cousin broke his arm." "He deserved it." I laughed. The sound felt too loud. A few minutes later, something moved. Fast. Low to the ground. Evan slammed the brakes. The truck slid just a little before stopping. "What the hell was that?" he said. My heart was already pounding. "Deer?" "Had to be." But he didn't sound convinced. The road ahead was empty. Just falling snow and trees. "Turn the brights on," I said. He did. The forest lit up in harsh white patches, shadows stretching between trunks. "I'll check," I said, already reaching for the door. Evan turned toward me. "Dude, don't." "It's fine," I said. "Probably nothing. I don't know why I got out. Maybe it was the beer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that stupid confidence you get when you've driven the same road 100 times and nothing bad has ever happened." The cold hit me immediately. Sharp, the kind that burns your lungs. I walked toward where I thought I'd seen the movement, and then I stopped. Right there in the snow. Footprints. Human. Boot prints. Fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened yet. I stared at them, my brain lagging behind my eyes. "No," I whispered. They crossed the road and disappeared into the trees. That's when the horn blared. I jumped so hard my chest hurt. I turned back toward the truck. Evan was leaning forward, gripping the wheel, laying on the horn like his life depended on it. "What are you?" I started. He pointed. Not at the road. Into the woods. I followed his finger, and I saw him. A man. Standing still between the trees. Maybe 40 feet away. Close enough that I could see details I wish I couldn't. He was thin. Short dark hair. Jeans. A t-shirt. No jacket. No gloves. Snow was collecting on his shoulders. His shirt was dark in places too dark. Stained. And behind him, half hidden, was a black garbage bag. Bulging. Dragged through the snow. He didn't look at us. Just stared at the ground. I ran back to the truck and slammed the door. "Go," I said. "Go." Evan didn't argue. As we drove past, the man didn't move. Didn't chase us. Didn't look up. He just stood there. Like we weren't even real. We didn't talk until we reached my house. Evan shut the engine off and just sat there, breathing hard. "I thought he was coming toward you," he finally said. "What?" "When you were out there," Evan said, voice shaking now. He was moving. Slow. Straight at you. My stomach dropped. "That's why I hit the horn," he continued. And he just froze. We called the police. Told them everything. They searched. They found nothing. No man. No bag. No footprints. The snow had erased it all. Evan stayed the night. Neither of us slept. To this day, we don't use that road after dark. Some traditions aren't worth keeping. I didn't expect the fear to stick around. That's the thing people don't tell you about moments like that. You assume once it's over, once you're home, once the doors are locked, once the police leave, it'll fade. You'll chalk it up to adrenaline or coincidence or bad timing. But fear doesn't work like that. Fear settles in. That night, Evan slept on the couch downstairs. My parents were already asleep, unaware that anything unusual had happened. I didn't wake them. I don't know why. Maybe part of me didn't want to make it real by saying it out loud. I stayed in my room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and the wind push snow against the siding. Every sound felt wrong. At some point around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside. I sat up instantly. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. Just the furnace kicking on. I didn't sleep at all. The police called the next afternoon. They said they canvassed the area again once the snow stopped. Checked nearby cabins. Talked to a couple of locals who lived off that road. No missing persons reports. No disturbances. No signs anyone had been there. One officer paused before hanging up. Probably someone cutting through private land, he said. Could have been dumping trash. Trash. I didn't argue. I knew what trash bags looked like. Evan and I didn't talk about it much after that. Not because we didn't want to, but because every time we started, the conversation died in the same place. The clothes. Neither of us could get past that. Who wears a t-shirt in that cold? And why stand still when someone drives past? Weeks went by. Life moved on. Work, bills. Snow turned to slush and then disappeared entirely. But the road stayed empty. Too empty. One night in February, Evan called me. "Hey," he said, "you ever look up police reports?" "For what?" "There was a guy arrested 2 counties over," he said. "Domestic thing. Took them days to find him." My grip tightened around the phone. "Why are you telling me this?" "They said he hid in the woods for almost a week," Evan continued. "In winter." I didn't respond. Guy was wearing jeans and a t-shirt when they found him. Evan added quietly. Silence hung between us. "Doesn't mean it was him," I finally said. "I know," Evan replied. "But I don't think I'll ever not think about it." Neither would I. The last time I went down that road was the following Christmas. I didn't mean to. Detour. Construction. GPS reroute. It was early evening. Still light out. Snow had just started falling again. As I drove, I felt it, that familiar tightening in my chest. The bend in the road came into view. The exact spot. I slowed without realizing it. And there, just off the shoulder, half buried in snow, was something black. A torn garbage bag. Empty. Split open. Like it had been dragged. I didn't stop. I didn't look twice. I just drove. Some things don't want to be remembered. And some roads remember you. I never planned on becoming a night security guard. It was one of those jobs you take when your life stalls out and you just need something that pays, something quiet, something that doesn't ask too many questions about why you're where you are. For me, that moment came in my late 20s, right after a messy breakup and a string of bad decisions that left me crashing on my cousin's couch on the south side. I told myself it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. That's how I ended up working graveyard security at Northgate Galleria, a massive indoor mall sitting just outside the city limits. Not downtown Chicago, but close enough that the place still felt heavy at night. Too big, too empty. The kind of building that echoes even when you whisper. Most nights were painfully uneventful. Walk the halls, check the doors, log the cameras, drink bad coffee and count the minutes. Honestly, the worst part wasn't the job, it was the hours. Your body never adjusts to being awake while the world sleeps. You exist in this weird limbo, where everything feels off by a few degrees. Sounds carry farther. Shadows feel deeper. And your own thoughts get louder. By December, I'd been there almost a year. Christmas Eve landed on a Tuesday that year. I remember staring at the schedule board earlier that week, hoping stupidly that maybe they'd give me the night off. They didn't. Seniority rules. And I was still low man on the ladder. So while everyone else was home wrapping gifts or drinking eggnog or arguing with family, I clocked in at 10:58 p.m., clipped my radio to my belt, and stepped into a mall that felt like a mausoleum dressed up for the holidays. The decorations were still up. Of course. That was the strangest part. Fake snow garlands hung from railings. Oversized ornaments dangled above the walkways. and right in the center court stood a massive Christmas tree easily 30 feet tall, lit up like it was noon instead of almost midnight. The mall stayed lit overnight for security reasons, but the holiday lights made it feel wrong, like the building was pretending to be alive. Lucky me, I muttered to myself, signing the logbook. The evening started like every other shift. I did my first patrol, slow, methodical, boots squeaking faintly against polished tile. Storefronts were sealed tight behind metal gates. Mannequins stood frozen in fake smiles, dressed in sweaters no one would buy until the after-Christmas sales. By 12:30 a.m., I grabbed a coffee from the security office. Burnt, bitter. Too hot. Still better than falling asleep on my feet. I took my usual spot near the center tree, sitting on a bench where I could see 3 main corridors at once. That tree became my anchor at night. Something about it made the place feel less empty. That's when I noticed the light. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Way down the west corridor, nearly a football field away, there was a faint glow inside one of the stores. A jewelry shop, I think. Small, narrow. The kind of place that sells overpriced chains and birthstone rings. I frowned. That light had definitely been off earlier. No way, I said quietly. No cleaning crews were scheduled, no maintenance, and per policy, nobody was supposed to be in the mall overnight except me. I stood up, radio crackling softly as it shifted on my belt. Probably a timer, I told myself. Still, procedure was procedure. I started walking toward it, pace quickening the closer I got. The mall felt even bigger from that angle, the Christmas music looping faintly through ceiling speakers, some instrumental version of Silent Night that felt anything but silent. When I reached the storefront, the first thing I checked was the door. Locked. I tried it twice, just to be sure. Okay. Great, I muttered. The light inside flickered. Once. Twice. That uneasy buzz crawled up my spine, the one that tells you something's wrong before your brain catches up. Hello? I called out, tapping the glass with my knuckle. Mall security. Nothing. I crouched to set my coffee down near a fake potted plant by the entrance, then straightened back up, and froze. Behind the counter, just barely visible through the glass, was the top of someone's head. Not a reflection. Not a mannequin. A real head. Dark hair. Low. Still. Like someone was crouched behind the counter, hiding. My mouth went dry. Hey, I barked, louder this time. You can't be in here. The lights cut out. Total darkness. My heart jumped so hard it physically hurt. Jesus. The lights flickered back on. The counter was empty. No head. No movement. Nothing. I stood there, staring, trying to convince myself I hadn't just imagined it. You're tired, I whispered. That's all. I reached for my master key ring, fingers fumbling as I tried to find the right one. But then reality hit me all at once. I didn't know where the light switch was, and I sure as hell didn't want to step behind that counter alone. Nope, I said, backing away. I relocked the door, pointless. Maybe. But it made me feel better, and headed back toward the center court. I grabbed my coffee, hands shaking now, and took a long gulp. Too fast. It burned all the way down. That's when I heard it. Click. Somewhere behind me. Then, bang. It echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. I spun around just in time to see someone run across the far end of the hall, disappearing into a side corridor that led toward the restrooms and emergency exits. Oh hell no. I breathed. Adrenaline kicked in before fear could stop me. I sprinted. By the time I reached the intersecting hallway, the place was dead quiet again. That section of the mall always creeped me out. Coin-operated massage chairs, kiddie rides shaped like cartoon animals, and the public restrooms tucked at the end. There was nowhere else for whoever it was to go. The exit doors were alarmed and locked from both sides. I stopped in front of the men's restroom, chest heaving. All right, I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. This is security. You need to come out now. No response. I cracked the door open slightly. That's when I heard it. Crying. Low, broken, almost, animal. My stomach dropped. Sir, I said, voice tight. If you're in here, you need to respond. The crying continued. echoing off tile and porcelain. I pushed the door open fully. The sound was coming from the far stall. "I'm calling the police," I warned. Last chance. Nothing changed. I knelt down slowly, heart pounding in my ears, and looked under the stall door. 2 black shoes. Facing me. Whoever it was, they were standing inside the stall, facing the door. Just standing there. Crying. Then the crying stopped. Without warning, the person dropped to their knees and looked back at me under the stall door. Face to face. It was the same man. Same eyes. Same dead stare. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. "Nope. Nope. Nope," I said, scrambling to my feet. I didn't hesitate. I left the restroom, pulled out my phone, and called 911 with shaking hands. When the officers arrived, everything moved fast. They kicked in the stall door, dragged the man out. As they walked him past me, he turned his head slowly, locked eyes with me, and said my name, perfectly. I didn't tell anyone that part. I finished my shift in silence, and I never worked another Christmas Eve again. I still think about his eyes sometimes. That hollow look, like he'd already decided how I was supposed to die. I was 7 years old the last year I believed in Santa Claus. I know that sounds like a cliché way to start a story, but when you're a kid growing up in a quiet Midwestern town like Ashford Ridge, Ohio, Christmas isn't just a holiday, it's a whole season. It smells like pine needles and burnt sugar cookies. It sounds like snow crunching under boots and the low hum of heaters fighting the cold. And back then, it felt like magic was something you could almost touch if you stayed up late enough. My parents, Rick and Lorna Hale, weren't rich by any means. My dad worked maintenance at the local paper mill, and my mom picked up shifts at the diner just off Route 14. But every December, they made damn sure Christmas felt big. The kind of big that makes a kid believe impossible things without questioning them. Our house sat at the edge of town, not rural, not suburban. Just a quiet street where everyone knew everyone. Old maple trees lined the sidewalks, and most houses had sliding glass doors that opened into finished basements or dens. Ours did too. That detail matters more than it should. Christmas Eve that year had been normal. Almost boring. My mom made meatloaf. My dad drank 1 too many beers and watched a rerun of A Christmas Story. And I fell asleep on the couch clutching a worn-out stuffed dog named Ranger. At some point, my dad carried me upstairs and tucked me into bed. That's the last normal thing I remember. I woke up because my mouth felt like sandpaper. Anyone who had night thirst as a kid knows exactly what I mean, the kind where your throat burns just enough that sleep isn't happening again until you get water. I sat up in bed, rubbed my eyes, and listened. The house was dead quiet. No TV. No footsteps. Just the faint ticking of the hallway clock and the heater kicking on and off. I slipped out of bed and padded barefoot down the hallway. The carpet felt cold, but familiar. We always left the nightlights on, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. My mom hated total darkness. Said it made the house feel empty. I grabbed a plastic cup, filled it at the sink, and leaned against the counter sipping slowly. I remember staring out the kitchen window, watching snow drift down under the streetlight. Big flakes. Slow and quiet. That's when I heard it. A sound from downstairs. Not footsteps. Not voices. It sounded like plastic crinkling, heavy and deliberate, like someone digging through a thick trash bag. I froze. Our Christmas tree was down there, in the den. We'd set it up near the sliding glass door because the ceiling was taller. All the presents were already wrapped and stacked under it, tagged with crooked handwriting and bows that never quite stuck right. I told myself it was my mom. "Mom?" I called softly. No answer. I stepped closer to the top of the basement stairs and peeked down. The den light was off, but the glow from the tree lights filled the room in soft reds and yellows. Shadows danced across the walls. Then the noise stopped. Completely. "Mom?" I tried again, my voice smaller this time. I started down the stairs. Halfway down, a lamp clicked on, and there he was. A man standing next to the tree. He was huge, not just tall, wide, broad shoulders, thick arms, boots planted heavy against the carpet. He wore a red suit that looked old, Not shiny like the mall Santas. The fabric was dull, worn thin at the elbows. His beard was long and white, but uneven, like it hadn't been brushed properly. He turned toward me. "Well, hey there, buddy," he said. His voice was low and gravelly, not jolly like the movies. But I didn't notice that at the time. All I saw was the suit, the beard, the hat. Santa Claus. My heart started pounding not with fear, but excitement. I thought you weren't real," I said. He chuckled, deep and slow. "That's what makes it work." He waved me closer. "Come on. Don't just stand there." I walked toward him, my legs shaky. He smelled like cold air, and something metallic underneath like pennies or motor oil. "You've been a good kid this year?" he asked. I nodded hard. "Mostly." He laughed again and patted my head. His hand was rough, calloused. "I'm just finishing up," he said, gesturing to a large black bag leaning against the couch. It was stuffed full, bulging at the seams. I tried to peek inside. "Hey now," he said sharply, pulling the bag away. "No peeking. Ruins the surprise." I noticed then that some of the presents under the tree were already gone. That should have scared me. But I was 7. He leaned down close and whispered, "You need to head back to bed now. Grown-up Santa business." "I want to watch," I said. His smile faded just for a second. "No," he said firmer. "You need to go." He placed a hand on my shoulder and gently but insistently steered me toward the stairs. "Which room's yours?" he asked. "The blue one," I said. "Good. Up you go. Quiet feet." I climbed the stairs, glancing back once. He was watching me, still smiling. The living room nightlight clicked off as I reached the top. The house plunged into darkness, except for the faint glow of my bedroom door. I closed it and crawled into bed, my heart racing. I barely had time to pull the blankets up when, bang, a loud crash echoed through the house. Glass, metal, something breaking hard. I squeezed my eyes shut and told myself Santa was leaving. Morning came fast. Too fast. I woke to screaming. My mom's voice panicked, sharp, raw. I ran downstairs barefoot, skidding to a stop at the den doorway. The tree was still there, but everything else was wrong. The presents were gone. Every single one. The sliding glass door wasn't shattered, it was off its track, slammed inward so hard the frame was bent. Snow had blown inside, melting into the carpet. My dad stood there, pale, phone pressed to his ear. "I saw Santa," I said. The room went silent. Both my parents turned to me. "What did you say?" my mom whispered. I told them everything. The man. The bag. The whispering. My dad's face hardened. He turned away and spoke quietly into the phone. Later, years later, he told me the operator said 2 other families had called that morning. Same story. A man dressed as Santa. Sliding doors. Empty trees. That was the year my parents told me the truth. Not just about Santa, but about locks. About strangers. About how sometimes monsters don't hide under beds. Sometimes they wear red suits and wait for kids to believe. I was 18 when my idea of safety finally broke. Not cracked, not bent, broken. Before that Christmas, I honestly believed bad things happened to other people. The kind you hear about on the news or read in comment sections late at night. I never thought those stories could crawl into your life quietly, without warning, and sit right outside your bedroom window breathing against the glass. Back then, my world was small in a good way. We lived in a dull, snow-heavy suburb outside Red Willow, Ontario. One of those places where every house looked like it came from the same blueprint, and everyone pretended winter wasn't slowly killing their mood. I'd grown up there. Graduated high school that summer. No big plans yet. Just drifting. Figuring myself out. The one constant in my life was my little brother, Noah. He was 11, too smart for his own good, curious, and annoyingly fearless. He followed me everywhere like I was his shadow, instead of the other way around. If I went outside, he was behind me pulling on his boots. If I stayed in, he'd sit on my floor asking questions until my head hurt. Our parents used to joke that we came as a package deal. What they didn't joke about was how protective I was of him. Maybe because I'd always felt like the world was sharper around kids like Noah. Softer people. Kinder people. We also had our dog. Briggs. Briggs was a German shepherd. Big chest, thick fur, eyes that missed nothing. He wasn't aggressive, but he was serious. Especially around Noah. If Briggs didn't like something, he made it very clear. That Christmas my parents decided we were doing something different. They were tired of noisy holidays, tired of phones, tired of schedules. My dad had grown up hunting with his father, and every winter he'd talk about cabins, fires, and snow so quiet it felt unreal. So they booked a group of cabins in a place called Hollow Creek Reserve. No cell service, no nearby town, just forest, river, and old logging roads that barely stayed plowed. I remember sitting at the kitchen table while Dad explained it, Noah bouncing in his chair. "Are there wolves?" Noah asked. "Probably not," Dad said. "Probably." Noah grinned. Mom shot him a look. "There are deer, and snow, and peace." I didn't say much. Something about it made my stomach tighten. But I ignored it. I didn't want to be the buzzkill. We left Christmas Eve around 2 in the afternoon. Dad's truck was packed tight presents. Food coolers, winter gear, firewood, and hunting equipment. Noah and I sat in the back seat, sharing headphones, laughing too loud. Briggs stretched across the floor between us. The farther we drove, the emptier everything became. Gas stations disappeared, houses thinned out, snow thickened. We stopped briefly in Milford, the last place that could barely qualify as a town. Met my aunt and uncle in a grocery store parking lot. They looked rushed, cold, distracted. No one lingered. Dad gave directions, hands waved. Engines started. Then it was just trees. Tall, dark pines that leaned in too close to the road. Snow piled high on either side like the forest was closing ranks behind us. We reached Hollow Creek just before dusk. The cabins were scattered not neatly, not evenly, just placed wherever the land allowed. One central lodge sat farther back, half hidden by trees. The rest were isolated, each one swallowed by snow and shadow. Our cabin was near the river. The sound of water under ice was constant, low, and unsettling once you noticed it. Inside, the cabin was warm but old. Wood floors creaked. Windows rattled faintly in the wind. The air smelled like pine cleaner and something damp beneath it. Dad started the fire. Mom cooked. Noah and I unpacked. Normal things. Safe things. We played cards. Ate dinner. Opened a couple of early gifts like we always did. Laughed. Took photos. Later, Dad mentioned hunting the next morning. "Just at first light," he said. "I'll take you with me." He looked at me when he said it. Noah's eyes lit up. "Can I come?" "You can watch," Dad said. Learn. By 10, exhaustion hit us hard. Noah and I shared the back bedroom. 2 beds, 1 window facing the river and woods beyond it. Briggs curled up at the foot of Noah's bed like he always did. Dad brought his rifle bag in and slid it under my bed. "Easier for the morning," he said. I nodded. I didn't know that was the last normal moment of the trip. That night, something changed. And once it did, it never went back. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Not the normal kind, at least. It was the kind where your body shuts down but your mind stays half awake, floating just under the surface. Every creak of the cabin felt louder. Every gust of wind sounded deliberate, like someone moving carefully outside. I remember rolling onto my side and seeing Noah's silhouette in the dim light from the moon filtering through the window. Briggs's chest rose and fell slowly at the foot of his bed. Everything looked fine. It didn't feel fine. At some point, I drifted off. What woke me wasn't a sound, it was tension. Briggs was awake. I could feel it before I heard it. The mattress shifted slightly as he lifted his head. Then came the growl. Low, controlled, deep in his chest. My eyes snapped open. At first, I assumed it was Dad. He barely slept on trips like this. At home, if he couldn't sleep, he'd sit in the living room with the TV on low, or make coffee at stupid hours of the night. Briggs never liked that either. He'd growl until Dad spoke. But this was different. The cabin was dark. No light under the bedroom door. No muffled sounds from the kitchen. Just the growl and the river outside. "Briggs," I whispered. "It's okay." The growl didn't stop. Noah stirred beside me. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "Go back to sleep." Briggs shifted his weight, claws scraping softly against the wood floor. His ears were pointed toward the window, his body tense in a way I'd only seen a handful of times before. That's when the barking started. Sharp, loud, sudden. Noah jolted upright. "What's happening?" Before I could answer, the bedroom door swung open, and the overhead light snapped on. Dad stood there. His face looked wrong. Not scared exactly. More like someone who'd already been scared and was trying not to show it. "Were you two laughing just now?" he asked. "No," I said immediately. "We were asleep." He didn't respond. He walked past the beds toward the window, his steps slow and careful, like he didn't want to make noise. He grabbed the curtain and pulled it aside. Cold moonlight spilled into the room. "What are you looking at?" Noah asked. Dad didn't answer. His jaw tightened. He leaned closer to the glass, eyes scanning the tree line beyond the river. The forest was pitch black. No movement, no sound except the water. After a few seconds, Dad let the curtain fall back into place. "Nothing," he said. "Just thought I heard something." He turned the light off and left without another word. Noah looked at me. "That was weird." "Yeah," I said. "Probably just animals." But my heart was already racing. Dad didn't lie. Not like that. I stayed awake after that. Every minute felt stretched thin. I flinched at the pop of the fire settling in the other room, at the wind brushing snow off the roof, at the river's endless, low murmur. Around 4 maybe later I must have drifted off again, because the next thing I remember was the sound of footsteps. Crunch. Slow. Measured. Not running. Not wandering. Walking. Right outside the window. My entire body went cold. I lay there frozen, barely breathing, listening as the sound stopped directly beneath the glass. Then, tap. Soft. Fingertips. I squeezed my eyes shut. Briggs stood up instantly, a deep snarl tearing out of him. The tapping came again. Louder this time. Then the voice. Low. Rough. Too calm. "I know you're awake, little man." Every muscle in my body locked. Noah whimpered softly beside me. "Why don't you come outside?" The voice whispered. "I won't hurt you." That was when instinct took over. I rolled out of bed and reached under it, my fingers wrapping around the cold metal of Dad's rifle. My hands shook so badly I thought I'd drop it. I pulled the curtain back. The man standing there didn't belong anywhere near us. He looked older than I expected, late 50s, maybe early 60s. His hair was long, tangled, clumped together like it hadn't been washed in months. His beard was thick and uneven. Layers of clothing hung off his frame, dirty and worn thin. His face was inches from the glass. His eyes were locked on Noah's bed. "Step away from the window," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. "Now." His head tilted slightly. Then he smiled. It was slow, deliberate. "Wrong." Behind me, Briggs erupted, barking louder than I'd ever heard. Teeth bared, body slamming against the door as if he wanted to go straight through it. Lights snapped on. Mom screamed from the hallway. Dad's voice boomed through the cabin. "Get away from my house." The man didn't run right away. He leaned closer to the glass, breath fogging it as he chuckled under his breath. Then Dad shouted, "Police are on their way." That did it. The man turned and disappeared into the trees. Footsteps crunching fast now. Careless, breaking branches as he went. Sirens came minutes later, red and blue lights slicing through the forest like something unreal. They caught him near the river. Cold, barely coherent, mumbling nursery rhymes under his breath. The police lights made the forest look unreal. Red and blue flickered against the snow, stretching shadows between the trees until it felt like the woods were moving. Officers moved carefully, boots crunching. Radios hissing softly. The cabin suddenly felt small, like it could barely hold what had just happened. Mom had her arms wrapped tightly around Noah. He was shaking so hard I could feel it through the mattress when I sat beside him. Briggs stayed pressed against his legs, growling every time someone walked past the window. An officer knocked gently before stepping inside. "You're all safe now," he said. Voice calm, practiced. "We've got him." I didn't feel safe. Not really. Dad stood near the door, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He looked older than he had 12 hours earlier. One of the officers asked me to explain what I'd seen. I did slowly, carefully. The tapping. The voice. Where he was standing. Where he looked. When I mentioned that he'd been talking to my brother, the officer's expression shifted. Just slightly. Enough that I noticed. They took statements, checked the windows, walked the perimeter of the cabin with flashlights. One of them quietly asked Dad how long we'd been staying there. "First night," Dad said. The officer nodded. "He's been around the area for a while." "How long is a while?" I asked. The officer hesitated. "Years." That word settled into my chest like ice. They explained later that the man was homeless. He'd been living off-grid, moving between abandoned hunting shacks and makeshift shelters deeper in the forest. Locals had reported seeing him from time to time, but he usually vanished before anyone could do much. "What was he doing here?" Mom asked, her voice barely steady. The officer didn't answer directly. "He's unwell," he said. "Delusions. Fixations. Fixations." I looked at Noah, his face buried in Mom's jacket. After the police left, the cabin felt different, like it had been contaminated. No one suggested sleeping. No one needed to. We packed what we could in silence. Dad called my aunt and uncle, and within half an hour, we were loading the truck again. Headlights cutting through the falling snow. We spent the rest of the night crammed into my aunt's cabin. Kids asleep on couches, adults whispering in the kitchen. No one laughed. No one joked. Noah didn't let go of me. Christmas morning came anyway. It always does. But it felt hollow. The adults tried. Coffee. Breakfast. A few forced smiles. Someone put on music too loud, like noise could fill the space where peace used to be. Noah barely spoke. Every time someone opened a door, he flinched. We left the reserve early on Boxing Day. No arguments. No discussion. The drive home was quiet. Snow still falling. Trees thinning out as civilization crept back in. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. It wasn't until weeks later that Dad told me the rest. We were sitting at the kitchen table back home, late at night. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes memories louder. "I need to tell you something," Dad said. I knew before he finished. "I heard him earlier," he continued. "Before he came to your window." My stomach dropped. "I was awake," Dad said. "Around 2. I heard singing." "What kind of singing?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Nursery rhymes." I felt sick. "He was right outside my window," Dad said, laughing, talking to himself. "Why didn't you wake us?" My voice came out sharper than I meant it to. Dad swallowed. "I didn't want to scare you. I checked outside. Didn't see anything." "So you left the rifle under my bed?" I said quietly. He nodded. "I figured if anything happened," he said, "you'd protect your brother." The weight of that settled on me slowly. I was 18. I shouldn't have had to be ready for that. But I was. And that scares me more than anything else. Noah doesn't remember everything. At least, that's what he says. But sometimes, late at night, I hear him lock his bedroom window twice. Sometimes he asks if Briggs can sleep in his room even though he's older now. As for me, I don't like silence anymore. I don't like woods. And every Christmas Eve, no matter where I am, I listen carefully. Just in case someone is standing outside, breathing against the glass. People assume fear fades with time. That if nothing bad happens again, your body eventually forgets what it learned that night. That fear is something loud and obvious. Panic attacks, nightmares, screaming awake. For me, it didn't work like that. Fear became quiet. It became habits. I started locking doors without thinking. Double-checking windows even in safe neighborhoods. I stopped liking curtains that were too thin. I hated ground-floor bedrooms. When I slept facing the door. And I never slept without knowing where the dog was. Noah changed too, just in subtler ways. For a long time, He insisted on nightlights again, even though he was too old for them. He stopped asking to go camping. When kids at school talked about scary stories or woods or abandoned places, he went quiet. Once, when he was about 14, he asked me something out of nowhere. "Do you think he remembers us?" I didn't ask who. "I don't think so," I said. That wasn't entirely true. Life moved on the way it always does. School, work, friends, Christmases that felt almost normal again. But every December, when the air turned sharp and the nights stretched longer, that memory came back clearer than anything else. The tapping, the voice, the way his eyes didn't look surprised to see me holding a rifle. A few years after it happened, Dad told me something else. The man hadn't been targeting cabins randomly. He'd been watching families, learning patterns, listening, waiting until he heard children. That knowledge changed the memory from frightening to unbearable. Sometimes I think about how close it was, how a curtain, a dog, a moment of courage changed everything, how easily it could have gone the other way. I don't think of myself as brave. I never did. I just acted because there wasn't time not to. That's the part people don't understand. Real fear doesn't come with a countdown. It doesn't give you time to decide who you want to be. It just asks the question, and waits. Noah's older now. Taller than me. Stronger. Smarter. He doesn't remember the man's face anymore. But he remembers how that night felt. We don't talk about it much. We don't need to. Every Christmas Eve, no matter where we are, we text each other the same thing before bed. "You good?" "Yeah." "You?" "Yeah." And that's enough. Some places don't want families. Some forests remember people longer than people remember them. And some nights follow you for the rest of your life. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly. Like footsteps in the snow just outside a window, waiting. I was 24 years old, and December had that kind of cold that seeped into your bones without asking permission. The kind where your breath fogs up car windows even after the heater's been running for 10 minutes. The kind where Christmas music sounds less cheerful and more exhausting, like it's reminding you how fast time is moving. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed that morning, pulling on thick socks, staring at my phone while snow drifted lazily past the window. That day wasn't supposed to be anything special. No plans, no drama, no danger, just lunch, a mall, and a stupid coupon for free underwear. That winter had been rough. I was working full-time, barely sleeping, constantly anxious in a way I couldn't explain to people without sounding dramatic. My boyfriend kept telling me I needed a break. "You're wound way too tight lately," he said one night while we ate takeout on the couch. "I'm fine," I lied automatically. Truth was, I'd grown up learning to be alert. My mom raised me alone, and she believed awareness was survival. Don't walk with headphones in. Always check your back seat. Park under lights. It stuck with me. So when my friend Jessa texted me that morning, "Girls' Day, lunch, mall, we use those coupons before they expire," I said yes without hesitation. I needed normal. Jessa picked me up around noon in her dented silver sedan, Christmas decorations rattling on the dashboard. "You ready to spend money we don't have?" she asked, grinning. "I'm not spending anything," I said. "That's the whole point of free underwear." She laughed. "Sure, that's what everyone says." The roads were busy, snow pushed into dirty piles along the curbs, stores were packed, everyone rushing, everyone distracted. The mall parking lot was chaos. "That spot's not even real," Jessa muttered, as a car squeezed in where no space existed. We finally parked near the entrance, laughing, shivering, pulling coats tight. Nothing felt wrong. Inside Hawthorne Plaza, everything smelled like sugar and pine cleaner. Fake garlands hung from railings. Red bows everywhere. Kids cried. Teenagers loitered. Older couples shuffled slowly, holding shopping bags like trophies. Christmas music echoed off the tile floors. I remember thinking how safe it felt. Public. Bright. Busy. That false sense of security is dangerous. We grabbed lunch at a small burger place near the food court. Jessa talked nonstop. Her job, her roommate drama, some guy she'd matched with online. I half listened, nodding, sipping my drink. Okay, she said finally, standing up. Underwear time. I rolled my eyes. Let's get it over with. The store glowed pink and gold, exactly like it always did. As we approached, I noticed him. He stood just outside the entrance. Tall, broad, heavy set in a way that made him seem immovable. He wore a dark hoodie that hung low and baggy jeans. His hands were buried in the front pocket, rocking slowly on his heels. He wasn't looking at the displays, he was staring straight ahead. I slowed without realizing it. Hey, I murmured. You see that guy? Jessa glanced casually. Yeah, probably waiting for someone. Why? I don't know, I said. Just weird vibe. She shrugged. You always notice stuff like that. She wasn't wrong. We walked past him and into the store. The warmth hit instantly. Perfume, lace, soft lighting. We joked, compared sizes, complained about prices like it was tradition. Why does this cost more than my phone bill? Jessa asked, holding something up. I laughed, relaxed. For a moment, I forgot about the guy outside. We paid, coupon redeemed, victory secured. When we stepped back into the mall corridor, I instinctively glanced around. He wasn't there. I felt stupid for feeling relieved. We walked toward the center of the mall, talking about where to go next. Claire's, Jessa said. I want something obnoxiously Christmassy. Of course you do. As we walked, that feeling crept back in, like being watched. I told myself it was nothing. Crowded mall, lots of people, but my shoulders stayed tense. The store was small, bright, walls of glitter and plastic and cheap jewelry. I didn't love tight spaces, but I followed Jessa in anyway. We stopped at one of the rotating racks near the entrance. That's when I noticed movement behind me, a reflection in the mirror. I turned my head slightly. My stomach dropped. It was him, the same man from outside Victoria's Secret, standing too close. Way too close. I stepped sideways, pretending to browse. He stepped with me. I shifted again. So did he. Okay, that wasn't accidental. I glanced up at him briefly, just long enough to see his face, blank, heavy-lidded eyes, a faint smile that didn't reach anywhere else. I forced a polite nod. Big mistake. His eyes locked onto mine like something clicked. I felt it immediately. That internal alarm screaming wrong, wrong, wrong. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Crowded mall, small store, people move around. It happens. But my body didn't believe that lie. My pulse was loud in my ears, and my shoulders stayed tight like they were bracing for impact. I could feel his presence the way you feel heat off an engine that's been running too long. I bent down slightly to look at a lower rack of earrings, pretending to be interested in tiny plastic candy canes and glittery snowflakes. He moved closer, not brushing past, not squeezing by. Closer. I could see his shoes now. Old sneakers, worn unevenly, toes pointed directly at me. No hesitation, no distraction. I straightened up slowly and glanced at Jessa. She was smiling at something on the wall, completely unaware. I didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to look dramatic, so I did what women are taught to do. I tried to be polite. I turned my head slightly and gave him a small, awkward smile. Just a courtesy, that's all. The effect was instant. His expression shifted like a switch flipped behind his eyes. His mouth curled upward, not friendly, not shy, tight, controlled. He stared at me without blinking. Too long. My stomach dropped hard. In my head, I heard my older cousin's voice from years ago. Being nice gets you hurt. I broke eye contact and crouched again, pretending to look at the bottom rack. That's when it happened. I saw his hands disappear under the front of his hoodie. At first I told myself it was nothing. An itch. Adjusting clothes. Normal movement. But then there was a sound. Soft. Rhythmic. A wet, repetitive motion that didn't belong in a store full of children and Christmas decorations. I didn't want to look. But I did. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the movement under the fabric. Slow. Deliberate. My throat went dry. I felt rooted to the floor, like my legs had forgotten what they were supposed to do. My brain screamed at my body to move, but nothing responded right away. He wasn't looking at me directly. He was staring at the jewelry rack, smiling. And every few seconds, his eyes flicked back toward me, checking, watching, enjoying the fact that I'd noticed. I straightened up abruptly and placed the earrings back on the hook, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. I turned toward Jessa, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jess." She looked at me and immediately frowned. "What?" "There's something wrong," I said. "We need to move." She followed my gaze and stiffened. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh, hell no." She stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. "He's been behind you this whole time?" I nodded. "He's following you," she said, her tone sharp now. "That's not accidental." My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. We moved together toward the back of the store. Not running, not rushing, just walking fast enough to look normal. I could feel him behind us, every step, every shift, like a shadow that refused to break. Jessa leaned in close. "Okay, cameras, counter, employees." "Yeah," I whispered. "Please." We pretended to browse hair accessories, pointing at random items. "Oh my God, remember when these were cool?" Jessa said loudly, grabbing a sparkly headband. I nodded, forcing a laugh that sounded wrong even to my own ears. Behind us, I felt him stop, then start again. Closer. I saw her before she spoke. A young woman behind the counter, probably early 20s, hair pulled back tight, eyes scanning the store like she was trained to do. Her gaze landed on him, then on us, then back on him. She stepped forward, positioning herself directly between us and him. "Sir," she said calmly. "Do you know them?" He didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on me. "Sir," she repeated, "are they your friends?" Slowly, deliberately, he shook his head. Her jaw tightened. "I need you to leave the store." For a second, I thought he wouldn't. The tension was unbearable. Then he turned and walked out, just like that. My knees went weak the second he crossed the threshold. "Oh my God," Jessa breathed. "Did that just happen?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah." The sales associate stayed near us. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I think so," I said. "Thank you." She nodded, but her eyes stayed alert. We stayed near the counter, trying to calm down, trying to convince ourselves it was over, that we were safe. We weren't. A minute passed, then another. I turned toward the front of the store without thinking, and stopped cold. He was there, outside, standing inches from the glass, his nose almost touching the window, his eyes locked on mine. The smile was gone. What replaced it was worse, focused, intent, hungry, like I wasn't a person anymore, like I was something he wanted. I whispered, barely able to breathe, "Jessa, he's still here." She looked. Her face went pale. Oh my God. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The mall noise faded into the background. Christmas music, chatter, footsteps, all of it drowned out by the sound of my own heartbeat. He didn't blink, didn't shift. Just stood there, inches from the glass, staring straight through me. It felt personal, not random, not confused, intentional. I grabbed Jessa's wrist so hard she hissed. "He's watching me," I whispered. "He's not even pretending anymore." "I know," she said. Her voice was tight. "I see it." The sales associate followed our line of sight and immediately stiffened. "Okay," she said, low and controlled. "Don't leave the store." She picked up the phone behind the counter and turned her back slightly, but I could hear her. "Yeah, this is Claire's by the East Wing. We need security. Now." Relief and fear hit me at the same time. Relief that someone believed us. Fear because I didn't know what would happen next. Those next few minutes felt longer than they should have. The man stayed where he was, tracking every move I made inside the store. When I shifted left, his eyes followed. When I stepped closer to Jessa, his head tilted slightly, like he was recalculating. At one point, he raised his hand and rested it against the glass. Flat. Claiming. I had never seen that look in someone's eyes before. Not anger, not lust. Something colder. Predatory. Jessa leaned in. "He's stalking you," she whispered. "Thanks," I muttered. "That really helps." She squeezed my hand. "We're not leaving you alone. Not for a second." I nodded, barely breathing. Eventually, an older man in a security jacket appeared at the entrance of the store. He looked tired, thin, slightly hunched, like this wasn't the first thing he'd rather not deal with today. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. The sales associate spoke first. She explained everything. How the man followed us, ignored her questions, wouldn't leave the window. I added details, my voice shaking despite my best effort to keep it steady. The security officer sighed and glanced toward the entrance. The man was gone. He shrugged. "Well," he said, "he's not here now." I stared at him. "That's it?" He spread his hands. "If he comes back, let me know." That was it. No report. No escort. No concern. I felt something crack inside my chest. The sales associate looked furious. She turned to us. "I'll walk you out." We didn't argue. We stuck close to the walls, moving quickly but not running. Every reflection in the glass storefronts made my heart jump. I kept expecting to see him step out from behind a pillar. But we made it to the exit. Cold air hit my face like a slap. The parking lot felt huge and exposed. We speed-walked to my car, jumped inside, and locked the doors immediately. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Jessa exhaled shakily. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I said. "But I don't ever want to feel that again." That night I told my boyfriend everything. He was furious. We called mall management, filed a complaint, pushed for answers. They brushed it off. One person suggested the man might have had a disability and had wandered off without supervision. Maybe, maybe not. But I know this. He knew what he was doing. He reacted to questions. He followed deliberately. He targeted, crowded mall, middle of the day, Christmas decorations everywhere. I wasn't alone, and it still happened. I used to think danger announced itself. Dark alleys, empty streets, late nights. I was wrong. Sometimes it happens under fluorescent lights, between glittery earrings and fake snowflakes, while Christmas music plays overhead. Trust your instincts. Don't be polite when you're scared, and never assume you're safe just because you're in public. Christmas always makes me tired before it makes me happy. Not the good tired either. Not the kind where you've laughed too much or eaten too much and collapse into bed smiling. It's the slow, heavy kind that creeps into your bones sometime after sunset, when the day is technically over but everyone keeps pretending it isn't. That year, Christmas fell on a weekday. The kind where you're expected to be cheerful, even though tomorrow still feels like a workday in disguise. Snow had been falling since morning. Not the dramatic kind, just that constant soft drift that muffles sound and makes everything feel unreal. I woke up early, despite telling myself I wouldn't. That's always been my problem. I can never fully relax on holidays. My mind keeps ticking, like it's waiting for something to go wrong. My bloke, Hari, was already awake when I came into the kitchen. Hoodie on, hair sticking up, eyes glued to his phone. "Morning," I said. "Merry Christmas," he replied without looking up. We didn't do big traditions. No matching pajamas. No forced cheer. Just coffee, quiet, and eventually food. That worked for us. By noon, the apartment smelled like reheated leftovers and coffee grounds. Outside, the street was dead. Christmas in our neighborhood always felt like a ghost town. Curtains drawn, cars unmoved, the world temporarily paused. Around 3 in the afternoon, Hari disappeared into the bedroom with his laptop. Steam sale. He called out like that explained everything. I peeked in later. He was already lost to it. Headset on, fingers moving fast, face lit blue by the screen. I'd learned not to compete with that look. When he got like that, he was gone. So by early evening, boredom had settled in. I texted an old friend across town. You home? They were. I threw on my coat and boots and headed out, telling Hari I'd be back later. Don't wait up, he said, eyes still on the screen. The visit was nice enough. Too nice, maybe. The kind where you talk about old memories and realize how far away they feel. We laughed, drank tea, talked about people we hadn't seen in years, but my body started shutting down around 9. That's when my phone buzzed. Jari. Bandmates coming over. Old days, guitar stuff. I sighed. Me. I'm tired. Jari. Won't be late, promise. He'd promised that before. Still, I headed home. Snow crunching under my boots, breath fogging in the dark. The streetlights cast long shadows across untouched snow, everything quiet in that eerie holiday way. When I unlocked the door, I heard voices. Not loud, just there. The smell hit me immediately. Cognac. Strong. Sweet. Sharp. Inside, 2 strangers sat on the couch. They stood when they saw me. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and tattoos that looked older than me. The woman was shorter, stockier, hair dyed a deep red that had grown out at the roots. Both wore black like it was armor. Sunglasses indoors. I raised an eyebrow. This is her, Hari said, grinning. My better half. The woman smiled wide and stepped forward. You must be the famous one. I laughed awkwardly. Depends who you ask. They introduced themselves, names I've changed here because they don't deserve to be remembered the way they really are. Let's call them Vince and Lotta. They shook my hand. Firm, confident, normal. That's the word that sticks with me now. Normal. We talked. Small stuff, music, old shows, places that closed down. Lotta told me about her kids, both grown, both doing their own thing now. Vince cracked jokes, his accent thick but understandable. I joked, half serious, half tired. I'm heading to bed soon. If you get too loud, I'm kicking you all out. They laughed. Lotta put a hand over her chest dramatically. We wouldn't dare. I believed her. At least, I thought I did. I didn't stay long in the living room. That wasn't a conscious decision at first. It was more like my body quietly opting out while my mind tried to stay polite. I perched on the arm of the couch, listening to Vince and Hari reminisce about bands I'd never heard of, venues that didn't exist anymore, people who'd sold out or lost their edge. The bottle of cognac sat on the coffee table, already half empty. Hari poured generously. Too generously. I watched him tip the glass back, the liquid disappearing faster each time. His cheeks had that familiar flush, the one that made my stomach tighten just a little. He wasn't violent by nature, but strong alcohol loosened something in him. A fuse shortened. Words sharpened. I caught Lotta watching him too, not judgmental, assessing. So, she said to me, crossing her legs, you're not from around here, are you? No, I said. Moved here years ago. Must have been hard, she replied. Different culture. I nodded. You get used to it? Vince laughed. She still says sorry when people bump into her. I smiled, but something in the way he said it rubbed me wrong, like he knew more than he should. The guitar came out eventually. Hari strummed, Vince joined in, fingers clumsy but confident. Lotta hummed along, eyes closed, swaying slightly. It was nice, loud but not unbearable. Still, exhaustion pulled at me harder with every minute. Around midnight I stood. I'm calling it, I said. Early night for me. Lotta stood too and hugged me without hesitation. Her arms were strong, firm. "Sleep well," she said into my ear. Vince raised his glass. "We'll keep it down." I smiled. I've heard that one before. I went to bed with the door cracked, just enough to hear if things got out of hand. At first, they didn't. The music faded. The talking softened. I drifted in and out, half listening to laughter and clinking glasses. At some point, I remember thinking maybe I'd been wrong to worry. Then I slept. I woke up choking on sound. Not noise, shouting, angry, raw, the kind that snaps you awake instantly, heart hammering before your brain even catches up. I sat up, disoriented, the red digits of the clock glowing. 5:02 a.m. Something crashed in the living room. "Enough!" someone yelled. Another voice shouted back, words slurred, sharp-edged. I swung my legs out of bed, adrenaline burning away the sleep. My hoodie was on the chair. I pulled it over my head and stepped into the hallway. The light from the living room spilled out like a wound. And there he was, Hari. Standing stiff, shoulders hunched forward, arm outstretched, a knife in his hand, pointed straight at Vince. Time slowed in a way I can't properly explain. I remember thinking absurdly that it was the good kitchen knife, the sharp one I always told him not to leave in the sink. Vince stood frozen, hands half raised. Lotta was between them, turned slightly sideways like she was used to standing between angry men. Everyone was shouting at once. Finnish, English, drunk nonsense colliding in the air. "What the hell is going on?" I yelled. No one answered. I didn't think, I just moved. "Shari," I said sharply, "put it down." He turned toward me, eyes glassy, jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. "They disrespected me," he snapped, "in my own house. Put the knife down." I stepped closer. The blade glinted under the light. For a second, I genuinely thought he might refuse. Then his grip loosened. I took the knife from his hand. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let it show. I set it on the counter behind me, out of reach. "Everyone calm the fuck down," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded steadier, colder. The shouting continued, but quieter now. Accusations, old wounds dragged up from nowhere. Vince slurring about loyalty, Hari yelling about respect. Lotta finally snapped. She turned to Hari, her voice suddenly clear, sharp enough to cut through everything else. "How would you feel," she said slowly, "if I held a knife to your woman?" Silence. It landed wrong. I didn't realize it at the time. Back then, it sounded like logic. Like empathy. I nodded. "Exactly. Think about that." Lotta looked at me. Really looked. Her mouth curved into a small smile. Not warm. Not reassuring. Knowing. That's when my skin prickled. The argument fizzled after that, like a fire starved of oxygen. Apologies followed. Hugs. Slurred laughter. The kind of drunk forgiveness that feels more like exhaustion than resolution. Eventually, Vince and Lotta grabbed their coats. "We should go," Lotta said. They hugged Hari, then me. Lotta's grip lingered. "You're always welcome to visit," she said. I forced a smile. The door closed behind them. The apartment felt too quiet. The door clicked shut behind them, and for a few seconds neither of us moved. It felt like the apartment was holding its breath. The smell of cognac still hung heavy in the air, mixed with cold air from the open door and something metallic I couldn't quite place. My hands were shaking now that there was nothing left to do with them. I locked the door. Then I leaned against it. "What the fuck was that?" I said quietly. Hari sat down hard on the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "I don't know," he muttered. "I don't even remember picking up the knife." That scared me more than anything else so far. I went into the kitchen and rinsed my hands even though they weren't dirty. The water felt too hot, then too cold. I couldn't find the middle. When I came back, he was still sitting there. "I'm sorry," he said. "I really am. I shouldn't drink that stuff, it messes me up." I nodded. I'd heard that before. Still, this felt different. Bigger. We went to bed without turning off the lights. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying Lada's words in my head. How would you feel if I held a knife to your woman? There was something about the way she'd said it. Not angry, not scared. Certain. Just as I was starting to drift off again, Hari spoke. You know, they're not just old band friends. I turned my head. What do you mean? He hesitated. They've killed people. I sat up so fast the blanket slid off me. What? They're murderers, he said, rubbing his face. Long time ago, before I really knew them well. Did time, both of them. My mouth felt dry. You're joking. I'm not. The room felt suddenly very small. How many? I asked. I don't know, he said. A couple, maybe more. It was complicated. I thought about Lada's smile, about the way she hugged me, about how normal they'd seemed. You let them into our house, I said. I didn't think. No, I snapped. You didn't. He went quiet. Sleep didn't come after that. The next few days felt wrong. Nothing else happened. No knocks at the door, no messages, no sudden revelations. Just normal life stubbornly continuing, which somehow made everything worse. I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. Every word, every look. I kept thinking about how easily I'd stepped between them. How instinctively I'd trusted Lada when she spoke. How natural it felt to back her up. That's what haunted me most. Not the knife, not the shouting, the normality. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Vince never once seemed afraid. The way Lada positioned herself during the argument. Always slightly sideways, always between people. The way her voice went perfectly calm when she made her point. That wasn't instinct. That was experience. One night I asked Hari, did they ever talk about it? He shook his head. No, not directly. That scared me even more. People who brag scare you less than people who don't need to. Christmas decorations stayed up longer than usual that year. I didn't have the energy to take them down. The lights felt fake, cheerful in a way that didn't match what sat in my chest. I kept thinking about the invitation. You're always welcome to visit. I knew we never would. Weeks passed, then months. Hari stopped drinking entirely, not dramatically, just stopped. He never touched the cognac again. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and listen to the quiet, to the snow falling outside, to the city breathing, and I'd think about how easily evil blends in, how it laughs at your jokes, how it talks about its kids, how it hugs you goodnight. If I passed them on the street, I wouldn't cross to the other side. And that's the most terrifying part of all. So do the couple who spent Christmas night in my living room, the ones who smiled, drank, forgave, and left like any other guests. Let's not meet again. I still remember how normal that evening felt, and maybe that's the part that messes with me the most. I'd always loved Christmas Eve for its quiet, not the movie version with big family dinners and wrapping paper everywhere, but the calm that settles in once the sun goes down and most people are already inside. Our place usually went dead silent by 7. No traffic, no kids. Just the hum of heaters kicking on and off and the occasional bark from a dog somewhere down the road. We lived in a small rental on a dead-end street just outside a town called Ridgewood Flats. One of those semi-rural pockets where houses are spread far enough apart that you don't casually bump into neighbors. It wasn't the middle of nowhere, but it wasn't suburbia either. A few ranch-style homes, a couple old trailers, and a lot of trees. The kind of place where headlights at night actually meant something. I was on the couch with my fiancé, Caleb, both of us half distracted, half relaxed. The cable had gone out about 20 minutes earlier, and we were troubleshooting it the lazy way. Unplugging things, plugging them back in, Googling the modem model number, arguing quietly about whether the outage was definitely weather-related or just the cable company being useless again. The living room lights were dim. We only had the small lamp on by the window, the one with the warm yellow bulb we never replaced because it made the room feel softer. The TV was dark, reflecting the room back at us like a mirror. Our front door sat directly across from the couch, with a big oval-shaped glass window in the center. On either side of the living room were two large windows that faced the driveway and street. During the day, they let in a ton of light. At night, they mostly showed darkness and reflections. I remember leaning back against the armrest and saying, "If it's still out tomorrow, I'm calling them first thing." Caleb snorted. "Good luck. They'll say it's on our end somehow." I was smiling when it happened. The sound came out of nowhere, tires screaming against gravel way too fast for a driveway that short. The engine revved hard, then cut abruptly. Headlights washed over the living room walls. Before I could even process it, two car doors slammed shut, then yelling, "Hey, it's us!" The voices were loud, aggressive, and way too close. My first reaction was irritation. My stomach tightened the way it always did when someone showed up unannounced. "Oh my God," I muttered. "Please don't tell me that's your cousin." I turned my head toward Caleb to roll my eyes, and he was already standing. Not slowly, not confused. He moved like something had snapped him into place. In 2 steps, he was down the hallway toward the back bedroom. That's when the unease hit me. Caleb didn't spook easily. He wasn't jumpy. He wasn't dramatic. If anything, he tended to underestimate situations. The fact that he didn't even look back at me before disappearing down the hall made my chest go cold. The yelling outside got louder. "Open the door." I heard boots on the porch, heavy steps. One set, then another. Something thudded against glass. I turned toward the window on my left, just in time to see a face pressed close to it. A man. Late 30s, maybe. Scruffy beard. Wide eyes. His breath fogged the glass as he stared straight at me like he could see through the reflection. He lifted his hand and banged on the window. Hard. Behind him, another man was yanking on the front door handle, peering through the oval glass, cupping his hands around his eyes to block the glare from inside. "Let us in," he shouted. "Come on." This wasn't friendly. Not drunken lost friendly. Not wrong address awkward. This was demanding, angry, urgent in a way that made my pulse pound in my ears. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe they had the wrong house. Maybe there was an emergency, maybe... "Babe," I yelled, my voice cracking. "Caleb." He didn't answer. The man at the window leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching the glass. "Don't act like you don't know us," he said. "We know you're home." I slid off the couch slowly, keeping my eyes on him. My legs felt weak, like I'd stood up too fast. "I'm calling the cops," I shouted, hoping my voice sounded stronger than I felt. The man at the door laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Go ahead," he said. "Just open the damn door." I backed away, moving toward the hallway, my heart slamming so hard it hurt. Caleb reappeared then, stepping out of the bedroom with something in his hands. The pistol. He didn't raise it, didn't point it. He just held it low, close to his side, his jaw tight. "Leave," he said, loud and steady. "Now." The men froze. For half a second, no one moved. Then the one at the window stepped back, lifting his hands slightly, palms out. "Whoa, man," he said. "No need for that." They retreated a few steps down the porch, closer to the driveway. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe that was enough. Maybe... I took a step toward the door, and the second my shadow crossed the oval window, they surged forward again. "Open it!" the man yelled, slamming his fist against the door. "Let us in!" The other one ran to the side window, rattling it violently. "We're not messing around," he shouted. "You hear me?" My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I dialed 911. I moved back into the hallway, pressing myself against the wall, peeking through the narrow window near the kitchen. They were pacing now, agitated. One kept muttering under his breath. Then something weird happened. They started shouting names. "Ryan! It's me! Come on, man, you know who I am!" Different names, over and over. None of them ours. None familiar. The dispatcher answered, her voice calm, professional. 911, what's your emergency? There are 2 men trying to break into my house, I whispered. They're on the porch, they won't leave. She asked for the address. I gave it, stumbling over the street name. Are they armed? She asked. I don't know, I said. They're aggressive. They're banging on the windows. She told me officers were on the way, told me to stay on the line. Outside, the yelling shifted. The man by the driveway looked toward the truck, then back at the house. This ain't over, he shouted. You hear me? The other one leaned toward the window one last time, his face twisted into something ugly. Merry Christmas, he said, slow and deliberate. Hope you sleep real good tonight. Then they were running. Doors slammed. The engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as the truck tore out of the driveway, disappearing down the dead-end road without stopping anywhere else. No hesitation, no confusion, just gone. The police arrived 10 minutes later. By then the house felt different, like it had been violated without being touched. Every shadow felt wrong, every sound too loud. The officers took our statements, walked the property, shined flashlights into the trees. They told us it might have been a mistake. Wrong address. Intoxicated men. But nothing about it felt mistaken. They never followed up. Never called. Never found them. That night, Caleb and I sat awake until morning, the Christmas lights blinking silently in the corner, the cable still out. The house wrapped in an uneasy quiet that felt nothing like peace. I still think about it every Christmas Eve. About how close it came to being worse. About how normal it all started. And about how some people don't knock because they think you'll answer. They knock because they expect you to. I didn't wake up that morning thinking something terrible was going to happen. It was one of those gray December mornings where the cold doesn't slap you in the face right away. It just settles into your bones and stays there. The kind of cold that makes the house creak a little louder, makes the coffee taste more important, makes everything feel heavier. My name is Rowan Hale, and that winter, my life had been reduced to routines. Wake up before my daughter. Make coffee I barely tasted. Scroll job listings I'd already applied to. Try not to think about how I was 31 years old, unemployed, sleeping in my childhood bedroom again. Most mornings I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to my daughter breathe. That sound, soft, uneven, innocent, was the only proof I needed that leaving had been the right choice. My wife and I weren't living together anymore. I usually told people that and left it at that. It sounded cleaner. Less ugly. The truth was harder to explain, especially when you're a man and people expect a certain narrative. She hadn't always been like that. When we first had our daughter Lennox, things were good. Tired, chaotic, stressful, but good. Somewhere along the line, though, something in her snapped. Her patience vanished. Her temper sharpened. And slowly, without either of us really noticing at first, most of that anger started landing on a baby who didn't understand words yet but understood tone just fine. Yelling, slamming doors, calling an 18-month-old too much. The night I left, Lennox had started crying in her crib, and instead of comforting her, my wife screamed, "Shut up," loud enough to make Lennox sob harder. That was it. I packed what I could in silence and drove to my mom's place. CPS had been involved already, police too. That morning they'd been by again, asking questions, writing notes, telling me I was doing the right thing. It didn't feel like it. It felt like failure. Around 3:30 p.m., Lennox woke up from her nap, rubbing her eyes and babbling nonsense at the ceiling fan. "Hey, Peanut," I said, lifting her up. "You hungry?" She pointed toward the door and said, "Go." That was her word for everything. Go outside, go car, go store. The grocery store was 3 blocks away. A small, older place called Northway Market. Locals shopped there because it was cheap and close, not because it was nice. I figured we'd be in and out. I was wrong. By the time we stepped inside, the air smelled like stale bread and cleaning chemicals. The floor tiles were chipped in places and half the sale signs were handwritten with a Sharpie. I let Lennox walk, holding her hand. She hated carts, couldn't sit still. Letting her walk made her happy, and honestly, it made me feel like maybe I was doing something right. She waved at everyone. "Hi," she chirped, her voice squeaky and proud. Some people smiled. Some waved back. A few stopped to say things like, "She's adorable," or, "That age goes by fast." I smiled every time. We grabbed flour, sugar, cheap noodles. I remembered the milk last minute and cursed quietly to myself when I realized my arms were already full. I didn't grab a basket. That mistake replayed in my head later more times than I could count. As we neared the front, Lennox kept stopping, touching boxes, squatting down to inspect bright labels like they were treasure. "Come on, kiddo," I said gently. "Let's keep moving." She took 2 steps, stopped again. I was tired, stressed, but I didn't raise my voice. I never did with her, not after everything. The customer service desk was also Register 1. It was open, but the clerk was dealing with a return. We waited. I crouched beside Lennox and started clapping. Patty cake," she laughed, completely off rhythm, waving at a man walking by. "Hi." He smiled awkwardly and kept walking. I didn't notice anyone watching us. Not yet. The clerk finally turned. "I can help you now." "Thanks," I said. I told Lennox to hold my hand. She did. I turned to pull my wallet out. I let go for maybe 3 seconds. That's when everything broke. At first my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. It was like watching something through thick glass, muted, distant, unreal. I turned back toward Lennox just in time to see a stranger's arms closing around her middle. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, like she was a bag of groceries, like she wasn't my entire world. For a split second, my body didn't move. I remember thinking, this is wrong. Not this is happening, just this is wrong. Then Lennox screamed. It wasn't a tantrum cry. It wasn't tired or hungry or frustrated. It was pure fear. A sharp animal sound that ripped straight through my chest and knocked the air out of my lungs. The cashier's voice cut through the noise. "Hey, what are you doing with his daughter?" Her voice cracked on the last word. The man bolted. He turned toward the entrance doors, Lennox thrashing in his arms, one tiny shoe already halfway off her foot. I dropped my wallet. It hit the floor, cards scattering, but I didn't see any of it. Everything narrowed. The entrance doors didn't open. They were one way, exit only from the other side. Someone was trying to come in, confused, pushing against them as the man slammed into the glass, panic flashing across his face. The cashier grabbed the phone. "I'm calling the police." I remember my knife then. It was clipped inside my jacket pocket. A small folding knife. I carried it for dumb reasons. Cutting tags, opening juice seals, everyday stuff. My hand brushed it automatically as I ran. But I didn't pull it. I don't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear. Maybe I just couldn't stand the idea of hurting someone while my daughter was watching. I hit him instead. I didn't aim. I didn't think. I just swung. My fist connected with the side of his head right above the ear. I felt the impact all the way up my arm. He stumbled, his grip loosening just enough. I tore Lennox out of his arms. She clung to me instantly, fingers digging into my jacket, face buried against my neck. Her cries were hot and wet and desperate, soaking through my collar. "I got you," I kept saying. "I got you. Daddy's here." The man didn't fight. He looked at me once, eyes wild, unfocused, and then he ran. Out the door. Gone. I slid down against the counter, legs shaking so hard I couldn't stand anymore. My daughter's heartbeat was racing against my chest. I could feel it through her jacket. Someone handed me her shoe. Another woman kept saying, "Oh my God. Oh my God," over and over. The police were there within minutes. Lights flashing through the windows, red and blue washing over everything. Officers spread out fast, radios crackling. They asked what happened. I told them. Shaggy hair, beard, hoodie, average height, nothing special. Nothing that would make him stand out in a crowd. That scared me more than anything. They took statements from everyone. The cashier, customers. A guy near the door who said the man had been pacing earlier, pretending to look at the sale signs. I hadn't noticed. I hated myself for that. They searched behind the building. Dumpsters, alleys. Nothing. One officer drove us home. Lennox had stopped crying by then, exhausted, clutching my jacket like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. At the house, they asked more questions. Had I seen him before? Did anyone in my life look like him? What was my home situation? I answered everything honestly. About my wife. About CPS. About the officers who had been there earlier that day. They nodded, wrote things down, told me I'd done the right thing. After they left, the house felt too quiet. I sat on the couch with Lennox asleep on my chest, staring at the Christmas tree my mom had put up in the corner. Half the lights didn't work. The ornaments were old, some from when I was a kid. 20 minutes later, there was another knock. I almost didn't answer. When I opened the door, the same officers stood there again. But this time their arms were full. A massive box of diapers, wipes, grocery bags stacked so high I couldn't count them. A couple of toy bags tucked under one officer's arm. One of them held out a Christmas card. "We couldn't stop thinking about you," he said quietly. "About everything you've been dealing with." I tried to say thank you. I didn't make it. My knees gave out. I sank onto the floor and cried harder than I ever had in my life. Ugly, choking sobs that I couldn't stop. The kind that come from holding it together for too long. They waited, didn't rush me. Inside the card was a handwritten note. "You're a strong father. Your daughter is lucky to have you." There was cash tucked inside too. I didn't use it on myself. I bought my mom extra Christmas presents. Bought Lennox a toy kitchen she'd been pointing at every time we passed the aisle in the store. On Christmas morning, she ripped the wrapping paper with wild excitement, laughing like nothing bad had ever happened. I watched her play, safe and happy, and felt something settle inside my chest for the first time in months. I don't know who that man was. I don't know if they ever caught him. But I know this. Every time Lennox waves at a stranger now, I stand a little closer. Every time she laughs in a store, I keep my hand within reach. And every Christmas I remember that sometimes the world shows you exactly what matters, even if it scares the hell out of you first.